What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. Recently, I've seen a couple of the comments in the comment sections where you're looking for me to break down some of the safeties in this draft class, which is definitely something that I've been meaning to do. We'll definitely try to get through a couple of them, or hopefully more than that, before the draft starts over the next week plus. So I figured we could kick things off today with Georgia safety Lewis Cine. Really fun prospect that I'm excited to talk about. But before we get there, I do think it's worth talking about the overall depth at safety and the need at safety, which I think in some ways for some people has gone a bit under the radar. I think so many times we get caught up and say, well, all right, they got Savage, they got Amos. All right, we can check that one off the list. And we only look at starters and say, well, wide receiver is such a need because they don't have a starter there. Right tackle may be a need until Elton Jenkins gets back, or is Yash Nyman ready? You can start looking at some of those positions and say these are maybe more needs. But you look at safety, and it's really a need in three different ways. First of all, they loved playing three safety looks last year with Henry Black in the game. And I would be willing to bet they would have liked to have played it more if they had a better third safety that they would have trusted a little bit more, not Henry Black. So even if, we want to view this as they have Amos and Savage and they're good, they want to play three safeties on the field. And if they want that flexibility with Darnell Savage to maybe play him in the slot a bit or use him more uniquely, then you're going to want that third safety or a safety that you can pair with Adrian Amos on the back end, which allows Darnell Savage to do some of those unique things as well. So just having that third safety, I don't think you can just look at the roster and say Vernon Scott's going to be that guy. Now, he didn't play at all a season ago. They basically used a red shirt on him. I know it was his second year, but basically a red shirt season on him. And they wanted to keep him on the roster. Clearly, they feel like there's some upside there, but they used Henry Black ahead of him. They even used Sean Davis ahead of him when they picked him up. They did not want Vernon Scott on the field defensively or on special teams and just did not seem to trust him at all. So to say that he's just ready to be that third guy, I think would be taking a little bit of a leap of faith. And I think you'd be saying that about anyone else that's on the roster not named Darnell Savage or Adrian Amos. So if they want three safeties on the field, they probably need to add somebody to feel really comfortable in doing that. And again, that's a package that Joe Barry would really like to use and used a decent amount of a season ago. Number two is depth, right? Yeah, maybe even you feel comfortable with Vernon Scott as your third and Amos and Savage as your 1 and 2. Okay, even if you feel that way, if any of them go down, you have massive question marks and don't have that guy on the roster who's ready to come in and fill in. And you just don't feel comfortable. Even if Savage or Amos goes down, is Vernon Scott the starter now? And now you really don't have a third safety. So you would love some additional talent and athleticism and youth at that position to give you a little bit more comfortability should any of those players, specifically Savage or Amos, go down for any period of time. Again, it's just good practice to have starting caliber players, or at least close to replacement level players, if one of those guys goes down, because right now Savage or Amos gets injured and you're not feeling very great. And then even beyond that, even if you told, Brian Gutekunst that Savage and Amos and Vernon Scott would stay healthy all year and that you felt comfortable with all three of those guys playing in your three safety sets, look long-term, right? Darnell Savage has a very interesting fifth-year option coming up that they're going to have to decide on. And if I were to guess today, I would say that they do not pick up that fifth-year option. Adrian Amos is basically year by year at this point, and he's not getting any younger, and just how much longer he has on the team remains to be seen. So they have a need in the long term at safety as well, where again you would love some youth and speed and athleticism and just talent at that position to start developing players for potentially a future if either Savage or Amos aren't in that spot. So you have a need right now in your three safety sets. You have a need right now for depth behind Amos and Savage, and you have a need at the position into the future as well. So you can bet that if there is a player on the top of their board that they like in those top 100 picks, that Green Bay will very much be in the market for a safety to fill one of those spots. I don't think it's more complicated than that. The other thing is that we know that safety is a primary position when it comes to filling out your special teams roster. We know how key it is that Green Bay fills out that special teams with better players. And guess what? If you use a second round pick or, top second round pick, maybe even a late first on a safety, they can come in be that third safety right away, be depth for Amos and Savage. You can develop them long-term into a starter if either of them end up leaving, and also be a core special teamer. There's a lot of value in using a potential early pick on safety. So that brings us to potentially a player like Lewis Cine out of the University of Georgia. 6'2", 200-pound safety. He will turn 23 in October. So as we've talked about over and over, Green Bay likes youth and athleticism. Well, from a youth standpoint, usually they like 20, 21, maybe early 22. He's 22 now, doesn't turn 23 till October, so it's not like he's overaged, but he's more in that middle ground. Still, I don't think they would eliminate him for that, but again, will turn 23 in October. But from an athletic standpoint, he didn't test in the short shuttle, the 3-cone, or do the bench press, but a lot of his other traits tested out really well. I'm sure Green Bay would like him ideally to have a bit more weight and size, but they went with Darnell Savage, so clearly they're willing to overlook some of that. But he was a 93rd percentile safety when it comes to height at 6'2". His vert was in the 74th percentile. His broad jump was in the 98th percentile. His 40 was in the 98th percentile. And his 10-yard split was in the 99.9th percentile with a 1.45 40-yard dash. And that explosiveness, that first step quickness shows up on tape, and we will go over that in great detail in just a moment. Now, from a statistical standpoint, you love seeing that he got more involved and better year after year. 2019, he had 19 tackles. 2020, he had 52. 2021, he had 73. But from a stat standpoint, from clearly a box score standpoint, 0 sacks in his career, 0 forced fumbles in his career, 0 touchdowns in his career, no safeties in his career. Did have 2 interceptions, but still it's a relatively small number. So from a playmaking box score standpoint, he didn't stuff the stat sheet, right? So that will be something we will discuss, but his impact was definitely felt. And again, you love seeing that he got better, especially from a tackling standpoint, year after year after year. Now, how about his stats in coverage, right? Well, pretty darn good. 44 out of 69 completions against him when he was in coverage, 63.8% completion percentage, 423 yards allowed, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and 9 pass breakups. So overall, solid in coverage again statistically. That's all per Pro Football Focus, by the way. He did play some in the slot. He did play some in the box. He did play some special teams, but primarily he was a free safety at the University of Georgia. And I do think that's ultimately where he fits in best in the NFL as well. All right, let's get to some of the real positives with Lewis Cine, So I think the biggest thing that you will find right away that flashes and screams off the tape is his ability to run support. And I mean a freak when it comes to helping out in run support. No question about it. So his ability to scream up from safety, fill a gap, play under control, and make aggressive tackles on running backs out of the backfield is frankly one of the best I have seen from a safety prospect in my years watching tape of safeties and college tape, etc. He is so good at coming down and crashing in the box and making impact plays, knowing his assignments, knowing his gaps, and again, making impact tackles as well. He will absolutely lay a hit on you. You can wrap up a little bit better down below. He tackles a little bit high, which we'll touch base on. But man, he is a phenomenal run defender. And when you talk about what Joe Barry wants from his 2 safeties, right? He loves playing those 2 safeties over the top, splitting the field 50-50. But he's going to have 4 defensive players up front, 2 edge rushers, 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers usually. He's going to have that 6-man box. And in order to pull that off with 2 safeties deep, you have to have safeties that are willing to come and crash down and play aggressively, but smart, and make just quick reads and quick decisions and smart plays on the ball when teams run the ball. Because again, you line up with 2 safeties deep at snap, right? And they hand off the ball. Those safeties better be willing to get up quickly and wisely in run support to make strong plays and make sure that they're filling the right gaps. Lewis Cine is incredible in that regards. And I mean incredible, not being hyperbolic here. Again, a couple things he can do from a tackling standpoint a little bit better, but how he reads and reacts and gets up to the football and makes plays at the line of scrimmage and fills gaps is incredible. And I think the thing that I really enjoy about his game is it's one thing to have that speed, right? And that 4.340 speed, that 1.45 10-yard split shows up on tape. That pure, unadulterated quickness and speed flashes off the tape. But so many players that have that, especially at safety, will come up and they will over pursue. or they will be too aggressive and a player will make a juke and go right by them, right? I love how under control he is. Now, you will see him get over aggressive from time to time. There's a play here or there, still something he can slow up a little bit, but more often than not, he is aggressively filling his lane, breaking down, meaning, getting in his stance, and then letting the running back or receiver, who's ever got the ball, do what they're going to do, and then he's going to go make the play on him. It's perfect. It's a joy to watch exactly how he gets to his spot, settles down, and then makes a play on the ball and doesn't allow himself to get, to overextend or get juked out of his jock strap, etc. He plays very under control, and again, with incredible pace and incredible speed. Now with that, and we talked about this just a second ago, I usually maybe wouldn't highlight this early in the breakdown, but we talked about how important it is for maybe that safety to be able to come in and play special teams. With Lewis Cine's energy and intensity and his tackling and his thumping and his toughness and all of it, I guarantee you he and Rich Bisaccia are going to be very good friends if he would find himself in Green Bay. Now, again, he didn't play a ton of special teams at Georgia. He didn't need to. He was a starting safety, but it is something that I would expect him to come in and potentially be a massive impact player on coverage units if he buys into special teams. You never know for sure. Some players may come in and just be like, I want to be a defender. But with him playing arguably behind, Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage to begin with and needing to fill a role, I think he would very much buy into special teams. And again, I think he and Rich Bisaccia would be very quick friends, and he would be a massive impact player on Green Bay's coverage units in an effort to help fix their special teams. All right, what else? Read and react and instincts. I talked about his ability to play smart from that safety spot, but again, if you're playing those two deep safeties, you have to have the ability to have great instincts and read your keys and go fly to the football and make a play. And again, this is where Cine really stands out. His ability to make quick decisions, key on exactly what's happening in front of him, understanding offenses and concepts and what's happening. You can tell he's an incredibly well-coached player and knows exactly what he's doing. And his ability to make those quick reads and then that 4.340 speed, take off, play under control and make a play, that is what makes him such a special safety. And again, there's going to be some limitations, which we'll get to in just a moment. But when you just watch him, ranging and playing that safety spot and then quickly diagnosing on plays based on what's happening on the play, flying to the football and making a play, you get really excited very fast, especially how he would fit in with that Joe Barry defense and exactly those, again, two deep safeties and the need for those safeties to be able to run support. Again, it is a very special trait that he has, and he does it, again, as well as anyone that I've seen as I've covered college tape and college safeties that have been coming into the draft. The one interesting part about his game that is more, you have to project a little bit more, I guess I'll say, is his blitzing. Now, as I watch him play, I very much believe that he's going to be a tremendous blitzer from the safety position at the NFL level. Just his speed and his intensity and his energy, I think all of those things are going to lead him to be a great blitzer. I can't say for sure how he's going to do against maybe a tight end or a running back where he needs to get off those blocks, but I think overall his demeanor is set perfectly for it. Why it's a projection, he had 11 pass rush snaps in his entire college career per Pro Football Focus. You have to think about Georgia, right? They have those incredible edge rushers, incredible defensive linemen. N'Kobe Dean is a great blitzer. Like they didn't need their safeties to come up and blitz. They needed their safeties to run support and, cover and be back in playing safety, right? So he didn't get the opportunity, but I do believe it is something that he will excel at the NFL level. I see a little bit of like Bob Sanders in his game when I watch him play. And again, that gives you an idea of what type of player he could be as a blitzer if used in that capacity. And then the last positive I will mention and go over in great detail is that energy and that intensity and that hustle and that heart. You feel his presence on the field. And this is a player that was on a defense full of impact defenders. But it was Lewis Cine that I felt was the one that brought the impact and the energy and the intensity. And it was a tangible feel. When he made a big hit or when he made a play or when he went and did something, his team rallied around it. You could see the entire energy of the defense picked up. It was a tangible feel on tape. I believe he will be an impact player on defense and somebody whose play is felt and who makes the teammates around him better because of what he's doing. He does his job. This is a very Bill Belichickian, do your job player. It might not always be the sexiest. It might not lead you to getting 8 sacks. It might not lead you to getting 8 picks. It might not lead you to getting a bunch of forced fumbles and tip passes and it's all those sort of things. But he will make an impact and you will feel it. You on Monday morning when you check the box score, you might see, oh, Lewis Cine, 6 tackles, 2 assists, nothing else. You might be like, all right, did he even play in the game? And I guarantee you, you will go and you'll watch the tape and you'll be like, oh, wow. Like he impacted this game in a variety of ways and was flying all over the field and helping his teammates and doing exactly what he was supposed to do. That is the type of player that Lewis Cine is, and he will make a very big impact on whatever defense decides to draft him at whatever pick they decide to draft him at. Now, there are some limitations as well. And let me start off by just giving a quick rundown of what I want from a safety, ideally, especially if like the hierarchy, if you will. Number 1 is coverage. Can you cover receivers? Can you cover running backs? Can you cover tight ends? And as a safety, more running backs than tight ends, right? That's ideally what you want to be able to cover. But in a pinch, if you're blitzing a corner, does that safety have the ability to man up a receiver through the majority of that route while the blitz gets home? If you have the ability to be a really special coverage safety, your value as a safety goes up and through the roof because you can do so many more things as a defense if you've got a safety who can cover backs and tight ends and maybe even receivers in the passing game. That is 1A. 1B, almost in the same level, is if you have that ball hawking center field safety, right? If you don't have to play 2 safeties deep because your one safety can get to either sideline with incredible speed and incredible ball hawking skills and knock players out, he can come forward, he can do everything. Think Earl Thomas in that situation, right? Earl Thomas, you didn't need Cam Chancellor to play safety next to him. Cam Chancellor could be an extra guy in the box because if you threw right, Earl Thomas was there. If you threw left, Earl Thomas was there. You weren't throwing center because Earl Thomas was definitely there. And if you needed to come up and support the run, guess what? Earl Thomas could do that too. You needed him to cover in the slot, Earl Thomas could do that too. Now, he was a freak in his prime, right? So there's not many like Earl Thomas, but those are the 2 that have like high 1A grades. Can you be a true single high center fielder or can you be a special safety from a coverage standpoint? Those are your 2 where if you can be a solid overall safety and also have one of those traits, now we're talking early first round pick. If you don't have those, your overall value in ROI as a safety is diminished. If you think of safety overall, safety is not a premium position, all right? You will watch 10 plays in a row where the safeties aren't even involved. And that's just on defense. Like, imagine your defensive linemen always involved, your offensive tackles and linemen are always involved, your quarterback's almost always involved in offense, but defense is what? Not exactly a third because special teams doesn't take that many snaps, but it's less than half of the game as a whole. And now you might go 6, 7, 8 plays in a row where your safety wasn't even involved in the play. It's generally not a premium position. But you don't want bad safeties. We've seen in Green Bay what bad safeties do to a team. If you have bad safeties, they will get called out and you will find them very quickly and it'll make a huge impact negatively on your team. But the other thing is that, again, not premium position, but if you don't have those skills to either be a single high or cover great, your ROI, again, diminishes at a safety already in a position that's not a premium position. So it's really difficult to spend premium draft picks on a safety that, again, A, is not a premium position, and B, if they don't have the cover skills and they don't have the ball hawking center field skills. And that's where Lewis Cine is. He is a really good, potentially great cover 2 safety who's going to play half of his field and dominate coming up and run support. But if you need to ask him to cover a ton, if you need to ask him to be a primary center field safety, those are the things that you have question marks on. And to be clear, I don't think he's awful at either of those things. I think he can play center field in a pinch, and I think he can, with that 4.340 speed, get sideline to sideline and help you out. But I don't think it's his primary best spot. I don't think that's what you want him to be doing every down. And I do think he can cover some tight ends, probably smaller, some running backs, but he's got some stiffness in his hips. Tight ends are going to give him trouble, especially with the bulk and the size. He doesn't have the fluidity to cover wide receivers, so he's not that cover guy. He's not that center fielder, but he does everything else well. You can use him in the box. You can use him in cover 2. Again, really great in run support. There's a lot he can help you with, but you have to understand what he is and what he isn't. if your defense, which Joe Barry's is, cover 2, half the field, run support, and then, make sure you've got your side taken care of, safe player, smart player, he fits well in Joe Barry's defense. So that other stuff is less important. Just know that if you're spending a first round pick on that type of player, your ROI is ultimately going to be limited in some capacity. So that's where I sort of see him fitting in. If I were fitting him in with Green Bay's defense, I think he fits in well, and I could still understand probably like a top second round pick for Lewis Cine, because where I can see him is on early downs as a cover 2 safety with Adrian Amos, with Darnell Savage in the slot to run support there, and then he can come down and run support. You still have great coverage, pass rush, everything else. Alexander and Stokes on the outside, Gary and Smith, Clark and maybe Jerron Reed or TJ Slayton on the inside with Campbell and Chris Barnes. You've got a really good balanced defense on early downs for both run support and pass coverage, right? Now, on obvious passing downs, you can move Cine into the box next to a Devondre Campbell, move Savage back to safety next to Amos. You've got Jair in the slot, Stokes and Rasul Douglas on the outside. Now you're cooking. So you can use him on early downs as a deep cover 2 safety. You can use him on late downs as a box guy next to Devondre Campbell, and he could be a stud on special teams. So yeah, you have a lot of ways that you can use him very early on, and that's why I think he could potentially be in play for Green Bay somewhere in the second round. Now, from a negative standpoint, he does tackle high. He has to learn to tackle lower. He wraps up well. He squares players up. He gets there. He does everything right, but he goes way too high, and you will see offensive players drag him. And those are college players. Wait till it's Derrick Henry and AJ Brown and Deebo Samuel, etc. He's going to have to learn to tackle lower, or it's going to be a nightmare for him at the NFL level. As I mentioned, his hips are a little bit stiff in coverage, so that's something that I don't know that he's going to improve, but it's just going to limit him a little bit at the NFL level. As I mentioned, he is an impact player, but that box score, he may not have the forced fumbles, the sacks, the interceptions. So this is a playmaking league, and being able to come up with those huge plays is the name of the game. Like I said, I think he's going to make his impact in a variety of other ways and do his job very well. But again, if you're not making the impact with those huge playmaking plays, again, your overall, just your ceiling and your playmaking is going to be limited, because you really need to be able to do some of that stuff if you're going to be an impact player on the NFL level. He has poor hands. You will see some balls get to him and he just ultimately drops them. You will see him play a little bit over aggressive and out of control at times. Like I said, overall, that part of his game is a strength, but there'll be a couple times that it flashes, and I think he can still be a little bit better at it. And then again, you're talking about a non-coverage safety. You're talking about a non-center field safety who is more of a cover 2 and come up and run defense safety, but is also lacking a little bit in strength, who tackles a little bit high, and isn't the biggest from a weight strength standpoint guy in the world. So there's just some overall limitations to his game. Like I said, at the end of the day, I think if you know how to use him and you have the expectation that he's going to be a cover 2 safety in your defense, you feel really, really good about what he can bring to the table and how he can support in the run and how he can cover his half of the field. You are going to get a very, very good player. If you want more than that, if you're expecting your safeties to do cover 1, cover receivers and tight ends and running backs on a consistent basis, and you want a high-end safety that can check all of those boxes, Cine is not that. And that's why I ultimately think his value is probably more in the mid to late second round rather than a first round type of safety, just because he does have some of those overall limitations as to what he can do at safety. Use him well and use him wisely, and you will end up with a very, very good football player that will definitely make an impact right away, and you will see his impact on tape week after week after week. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate you. I'll be right back here with an all-new breakdown tomorrow, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.